My next guest is the proverbial Hannibal Smith of financial journalism. Ken Kurson writes the Advocate column for Worth magazine. And what this is, if you haven't seen, is like people who've been either ripped off by a broker or like generally screwed, I think in some monetary fashion. They write into Ken. And Ken, am I correct in saying that you essentially just bust heads until the problem gets straightened out?
Not exactly bust heads, but I do my best.
Ken is also at the helm of a very cool publication. It's actually more of a zine. It's called Green, and everybody calls it the definitive personal finance rag for Generation X. But frankly, I'm just calling it hilarious, and it's very informative. So we're happy to have Ken with us this morning. Ken Kurson, welcome to Capitalist Pig.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Let's talk first about your work in Worth magazine. I mean,
Okay.
the Advocate column is such a wonderful idea that there is such a thing. There's an advocate for individual investors. How did you get started with writing for the Advocate?
Well, I didn't come up with the idea. There was actually another guy doing the column before I came to Worth, but it was started because it needs to be done. There's so many people who do get, as you delicately put it, screwed by financial service providers. But there's also a lot of people who think they've been screwed, and they really haven't been. It's either their fault or it's nobody's fault, or that's the way the cookie crumbles in the world of investing. So these situations make for a good read, even when the person writing in is at fault. So the column tries not to take sides so much as educate the readers about how the financial services business works. Give
me an idea of some of the more common problems or common issues people write in about.
Well, the classic, the archetype letter is someone will write in, I don't know much about the markets, and I trusted my broker, and I'm someone who's risk averse, and he put me in a Latin American currency fund. I lost all my retirement money. Now, can you get it back for me?
And what can you do with that? I mean, as somebody who's supposed to be these people's advocate, I mean, what can you do with that?
Well, it sort of depends on how much is in writing, how much the broker can be proved to have promised them. If you give a broker what's called discretionary authority, the broker has permission to do whatever he thinks is best. There are certain guidelines. The broker can't, for instance, put you into a stock that his brokerage considers a sell. So if my broker works at Merrill Lynch and Merrill Lynch's analysts are saying, the stock of ABC company is terrible, and then my broker goes and buys it, he's got a problem. I'll usually prevail in what's called arbitration. Or if it comes to the advocate will say, look, your broker, your own house had a sell on this. Why are you buying it for him?
And what is then their response? I mean, the brokerage house or the mutual fund company, I mean, are they generally pretty accommodating towards you? Or?
If I've got some sort of smoking gun, yes, they are usually very accommodating. Worth has 600,000 readers. They're all real active investors, and you don't want that kind of black eye. The financial services businesses, and I'm not just talking about brokerages, but insurance companies, credit card providers, banks, they rely on trust, and problems arise. That's not a sign of a bad brokerage or financial service provider. It's how you handle those problems that really sets the rip-off artists apart from the upstanding institutions. And so most of them are pretty accommodating, and I'll call, and I've sort of developed lots of good contacts over the last couple of years of doing this.
I'm sure you walk in and it's kind of like, John Wayne at the OK Corral. You walk in and
something's swinging, but I don't know if it's a gun.
Oh my Lord, Ken, please, there are women and children listening.
No, it's
sure.
I think that's the impression, that I can just call up some secret bat phone that rings on the CEO's desk. It's not like that. I get put on hold just like everybody else, and I have to go through the story and fax over all the documents. It really takes a long time to solve your average problem.
And give me an idea of the volume of mail, the volume of correspondence you receive.
I get about 5 to 10 letters a day, but that sounds like more than it is. A lot of them are instantaneously dismissible. Like a lot of letters I get are, I have this security that I can't find traded on any market. What happened to it? I don't really bother with those. I have a standard form letter I send to those, and it's got the name of J.M. Smythe, which is a real good service for locating obscure securities. That happens all the time. Somebody's dad died, and in their attic, he's got thousands of shares of some company that you never heard of anymore. What are those worth? And sometimes they are worth something if there's been a bunch of buyouts. And
so out of the 100 letters, approximately 100 letters you're getting a month, you're able to kind of look into, what, 2 of them, 3 of them a month?
No, I look into and either solve or bring to some sort of resolution about 10. I always print at least 3. So,
so you're even doing work that is not. You're even doing work for these people writing and that isn't even published in the magazine.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. Because
Very cool.
sometimes something will turn out and it doesn't turn out to be a good story, but there'll be resolution. Like if somebody writes in and says, my broker's been impossible, I can't get him to take care of this, and I call up and one phone call he goes, oh, I didn't know there was a problem. Here, I'll take care of it. That's not really a good story for Worth's readers because it doesn't tell you anything about anything. But it's a solved problem.
All right, let me ask you a question about working at Worth, because I know that Peter Lynch frequently writes for Worth.
He writes for us every month.
Well, here's my question. Skin condition, is he albino, or is he like just an Andy Warhol look?
No, he has unusual coloring, no doubt about it, but he's not an albino. He's actually real handsome. I don't know if you saw the PBS Frontline special.
Yeah, I thought they were interviewing Andy Warhol back from the
well,
the
Andy
dead.
Warhol wore a wig. Peter's is just naturally real light. No, he's a real good-looking guy. He's got that thing going where he's at the age where he just doesn't have to care so much. He's a legend. He's a genius, and he doesn't need to care what creeps like you and me think about his appearance.
Well, let's talk about. If somebody wants to write in to Worth, let's finish with Worth. If somebody wants to write into Worth, has a question, or maybe wants the Advocate to look into something, where can they write you there?
They can write to the Worth Advocate, Worth Magazine, 575 Lexington Avenue, 33rd floor, New York, 10022.
And at the worst, you'll get a lovely form letter from Ken back.
No, I usually respond back.
All right, excellent. All right, let's talk about Green. Now, Green
Okay.
is Green's a personal finance zine that you started, that you edit, and it's just obviously been kicking major ass. And my question is, for me, the impetus for starting Capitalist Pig was that, I really felt like every other broadcast or radio program about investing was like sucked or was really boring.
Right.
Why did you start Green?
It's essentially the same thing. In fact, I think there's a lot of analogies. I'm happy to say Green was started way before Capitalist Pig, but there's a lot of analogies.
I'm happy to say that too, Ken.
Yeah, 'cause you're young and still have your youth and some of your hair. No, there's a lot of analogies. It's that this information is really necessary. There's a sea change in the way young people need to look at their finances. I'd be pleased to ignore it too, but it's just not possible in an age where Social Security is just not going to happen for us. Lifetime employment with one company is virtually like the cuckoo clock, and self-directed retirement plans are the way people have to save. So there's no longer this sort of comfort of going, I'll just let my company worry about it. You have to take command of investing. Plus, as you know and as I know, it happens to be fun and not as big a drag as the mainstream financial press or radio or media would have you believe.
Have you found, additionally, that it's a great way to meet women?
No, I haven't. In fact, I'm like the loneliest guy at parties. I think there's something so punk rock about personal finance because, anybody could put out a fanzine about music, and this is a bit, I'm from Chicago and was active in the music scene there. And it's like any neckbone with a Xerox machine and a computer can put out a fanzine about, what bands are cool. But it takes some cojones to put a radio show or a fanzine about personal finance. To the contrary, in terms of meeting women, it
hasn't worked for you.
Well, I'm married, I should say. I just got married a few months ago.
Well, here's just one of Chelsea. Talk to me about the women. This is our newswoman, Chelsea. Chelsea, isn't it true the women just are following me around? Like I have to beat them off with the stick.
I have to beat them off with the stick, Jonathan.
We're speaking with Ken Kurson. He is the editor of Green. It's a monthly personal. It's a quarterly
right.
personal finance zine. Ken, do you get tired of kind of being branded as like the Gen X magazine type thing? Is that...
Well, it's a double-edged sword. I know what you mean. I hate that phrase. It's really lame. And yet I've done quite well working that angle. So I don't want to be one of these guys who say, "Oh, I hate being called Generation X." At the same time, I'm on TV and on radio and media all the time because of it. So yeah, I think it's stupid. I think anyone of any age can read Green, and it's not. We try real hard not to put language in there that completely pegs what generation we are. But on the other hand, I'm 28 and I write like a 28-year-old. So the references are going to be to the the 70s TV shows and 80s bands that typify our shallow generation.
You guys ran a story about strippers. This was probably my favorite story, and like the business aspect of being a stripper. These girls are making dough. I mean,
and it's a real interesting business. I mean, we tried not to be salacious about it, and you're in an all cash business, so there are real questions from a personal finance point of view. Are you going to be honest about it on your taxes? Where do you keep cash these days? You just automatically
besides your G-string.
Are you going to really walk into Fidelity to open an IRA with like $2,000 in $20 bills? And also,
are you going to walk in pasties and tassels? Is another question.
Well, whenever I go there, I do. But also, there's this big gap on your resume. If most of the people who do that, or a lot of the people who do that, are college students or otherwise planning to sort of rejoin mainstream jobs eventually. You really want a 3 or 4 year gap in your resume. So there are definitely some issues that these people face, and the woman who wrote that story had a lot of close friends who were sort of working their way through grad school as strippers, and so she had some good insights in there.
Now, Ken, my mom happens to be sitting here in the studio, just literally a couple inches away from me.
Hi, Mrs. Hoenig.
Mom, listen up to this. Ken, you correct me if I'm wrong. Ken writes for a national magazine, Mom. He publishes his own national magazine and never finished college.
That's true.
Talk to me.
I'm a college dropout. Although I dropped out from one of the best schools in the country, so that should give me some props.
Dropped out from where did you leave?
University of Chicago.
And why did you leave school?
I started school, Jonathan, as a sort of an older student. I didn't start school till I was 23 years old, after having tried and failed to make it as a rock and roll musician. And by the time I had finished my third year of college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that was to be a writer. And I knew that the best way to be a writer was A, to write, and B, not to have to be as distracted as I was going to be by having to pay back enormous loan payments. As it was, I was pretty deep in the hole, and for every dollar I borrowed, it was going to be another day I delayed really becoming serious about being a writer.
So you took the steps. I would imagine that was pretty frightening, leaving U of C like that. I mean,
no, it was really frightening. I felt like I could always go back if I fell flat on my face.
Hear that, Mom? It can always go back. Go back.
And having started school later, I felt like I had a richer experience anyway. When I don't know about you, Jonathan, but when I was 17 years old and ready to go to school, right before I decided to instead join this band, all I wanted to do was drink and meet girls and screw around. And by the time I did end up starting school when I was 23, I really was serious about getting an education. So I think older students are better students anyway. But besides that, there's so many jobs out there that really don't require the stuff you learn in college. Americans subject virtually everything they do to cost-benefit analysis except this giant $100,000 they're willing to plunk down to go to these schools.
And surprisingly enough, I'm talking about applying for a job. You guys did a survey that said in applying for a job, 20% of the people do lie on a resume. Is that right?
Yes. Well, that's what our survey found. I predict it's more. I mean, we weren't able to do.
I cannot believe that only 20%.
Yeah.
Are lying.
I would guess it's more. We're unable to do a blind survey because we do it by email. So I think a lot of people are reluctant to admit that they do. But the ones who do admit that they do are do it with relish, and swear by it as a method of obtaining employment. I don't. If I had to answer that question, it would have been no. I've never told a lie or pretended to have a degree I don't have.
Me too. Yeah. Okay, we're speaking with Ken Kurson. He is the editor of Green Magazine. Can I say Green Magazine? It's more of a
Green
zine.
Magazine. It's sort of grown out of the fanzine.
Now, if you want to subscribe to Green, my friends, and believe me, you're going to want to, because it's a very cool read, and frankly, it's like a bargain. It's $10.
$10 for a year subscription.
Four
and we can
beefy
even
issues.
We'll even give you a free sample issue if you'll call our 800 number.
Oh, call the 800 number. What is the number?
It's 800-477-2968. So free copy of Green. Call 800-477-2968.
Cool. Well, Ken, a terrific job today. I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning, and will you come back again?
Absolutely, Jonathan.
All right, God bless.